Kenmore City Council is now in session. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Culver.
Present.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Sassen.
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik. Here. Councilmember Lutsis.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
All present.
Would you all please stand and join me in the flag salute?
Flag of the United States of America.
Which it stands. God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Mr. City Manager, where is the fun?
Well, I'm actually going to have one of our Kenmore residents, Tracy Bonashinsky, answer that question. So Friday was the 5-year anniversary of her habitat restoration work with Snow King Watershed Council. So we've asked her to report on that and talk about all the fun that's been had over the last 5 years.
Thank you, Rob, and good evening, Honorable Mayor, Honorable Deputy Mayor, and Honorable Council members. I am excited to let you know about the fun we had at Wallace Swamp Creek Park this past Friday, November 29th. That day marked the 5th anniversary of Snow King Watershed Council Swamp Creek Habitat Restoration Project. 24 volunteers spent a collective 64.75 hours on habitat restoration tasks. We dug invasive plants such as Himalayan blackberry, ivy, foxglove, and thistle. We laid a thick layer of mulch on top of cardboard to suppress weed growth and prevent erosion. We also picked up trash and did some trail maintenance. It was pure magic, as you can see there in the bottom square. I would like to take this opportunity to reflect on 5 years of work. Rain or shine, community volunteers have been working to make the Swamp Creek watershed a healthier place for everyone. We started at Wallace Swamp Creek Park in 2019. In early 2022, we expanded to a western portion of Tuolak Khades Park that I called the South Site. In August 2024, we joined efforts to care for the recently restored areas of Tuolak Khades Park at the main park entrance. We've had 148 work parties, which over 5 years averages to almost every other week. Right now, we generally work on a 3 weekends on, 1 weekend off schedule. I don't track unique volunteers, but I do track how many people come out to each work party. Over 5 years, 1,799 volunteers have put in a collective 4,586.5 hours of habitat restoration work as part of this project. That is the equivalent of one person working full-time for 26 months or just over 2 years. We have cleared invasive plants from approximately 5,000 square feet of earth at Wallace Swamp Creek Park and the South Site, and planted approximately 1,000 native trees and bushes across all 3 sites. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to reflect on our past. Here's a group photo from our very first work party at Wallace Swamp Creek Park. Milton Curtis made me very nervous by bringing a power tool, but we cleared a lot of blackberry and everyone stayed safe. We were not able to celebrate our first birthday together in 2020 because of a spike in COVID cases. This was still very early in the pandemic, and we had adjusted and would continue to adjust how we were able to gather safely. Much of the early work was done by me alone, or me and one other household, which mostly meant me and one other person. We did work on our second birthday, but I didn't document the occasion with a group photo. This photo does, though, remind me of how thick the blackberry used to be along 73rd. It's not there anymore. Our third birthday was so wet and cold. I think there were 5 of us there and it rained the entire time. That was the day I realized I needed a new raincoat. Here's a picture from our 4th birthday. I still had not bought that new raincoat, but I do look really happy standing with all those beautiful people and dry too. And here we are again on our 5th birthday. It's easy to know where to begin with thank yous. Those go to the first peoples of this region, the Coast Salish. Without their enduring stewardship of the land since time immemorial, we would not have the honor of tending to the very ecosystems that support our existence today. From there, it gets a lot harder. mostly for risk of leaving someone out. Every single person who has been part of this project over the past 5 years in any way has touched me, and I'm so grateful for what they've given to me and to our community. Thank you all, council members, for creating the kind of community where this can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy, for everything you've done. It's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. And it's a lot of fun. If you folks haven't had a chance to do it, get on our email list and get out there when you can. It's satisfying work. I want to thank Councilmember Shrednick for pointing out that I inadvertently skipped over the land acknowledgements, so we'll circle back to that. We acknowledge, excuse me, the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Soxhawtl, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working towards a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land. So with that, we are now going to have public comments. We want to welcome folks to the council's meeting. Please address your comments to the mayor and the council. Folks will have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and city of residence and keep within the allotted time. To make every person feel welcome and safe here, please refrain from booing, clapping, heckling, yelling, or other interruptions. The meeting is recorded for transparency. Thank you for being here and for sharing your input respectfully. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 3 guests wishing to speak on site and 1 online. John Adamski, followed by Patrick O'Brien and Elizabeth Mooney, and Corey Holder online.
Thank you to the council for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I appreciate it. My name is John Adamski. I'm a 56-year resident of Kenmore. I live down on Arrowhead Point. I have 2 thank yous, one for inviting tonight's presentation for the Sammamish River Council capital investment strategy, and second for supporting the ongoing effort by the city, Herrera, and King County Ecology to identify the sources of algae in the north end of the lake and propose methods to mitigate that algae growth. I've been cooperating with that effort as a citizen observer of algae in the lake. We're concerned about algae that is now present in the lake because it's potentially toxic and can sicken humans or pets that ingest it. Over the last few years, several samples of the Kenmore algae have been tested positive for toxicity. Nobody's been hurt yet. No pets have gotten sick, but I'm worried because there's new little puppies that love to go in the water in our neighborhood. And I have seen a lot of algae this year in our neighborhood. The algae blooms are an annual occurrence in late fall and have been especially noticeable over the last 10 years. It's been observed primarily along the east shore of the lake, from the river mouth south about a mile to Arrowhead Cove. The algae on the surface appears to drift with the wind and with the lake currents. We don't know what the algae source is, and that is what the study is all about. But we suspect that the algae comes from the area near the river mouth where there is a large accumulation of the non-toxic form of green algae that grows on the surface of the water, floats there and in the river over the summer times, and then it sinks and decays and becomes food for the algae that's in the benthos or in the water. That's what we suspect anyway. At my home in Arrowhead, I've seen and photographed algae scum 16 times, including this morning, since late October of this year, about 40% of the days, over this last month and a half. I've also photographed algae at Lagoon Park and in the adjacent marina a number of times during this time. I have 3 things to ask. First, of the committee, the committee that's working on the Sammamish Capital River investment plan. 2, please include the river mouth in the planning for action to improve water quality. Second, to consider early implementation of water quality measurements like nutrients and bacteria flow into the lake. These measurements were there for a number of years, but were taken out of operation a few years ago for budget reasons. And I think it's one of the things that can really help us
Thank
understand
you.
what's going on the lake.
Thank you. Patrick O'Brien.
Good evening, Pat O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. First of all, this acknowledgement of the First Peoples, you have done nothing, or very little, to show any respect for the First Nations. Lake Point is a prime example. The reissuing of the license to the Kenmore asphalt plant, that is a total slap in the face of anybody that's thinking about the environment. The public comment period used to be 5 minutes for a public hearing. Somebody at the city changed it to 3 minutes. I don't find that anywhere near the amount of time, and I find that that's an interruption of First Amendment address to the government, which affects me and everybody else in Kenmore the most. Nigel, when there's a point of order as far as an RCW goes, you need to consult with Don Raton and find out the validity of that before you make instructions to stop on the point of order. You're not an attorney. She is. She can tell you what that RCW is. You are not even-handed in your application. So I really have a hard time with some of your leadership qualities. Next, we have, I need an apology. Janet Hayes needs an apology from Don Raton, Samantha Loyuk, the attorneys of Inslee Best, on the false declaration that Janet Hayes did not timely submit her public comments on the dredging. And Inslee Best lied, knew they lied, and we can collaborate that any way you want. We can go to court, or we can just turn it over to the Washington State Bar. But we want an apology and an acknowledgement that she did in fact get those documents in, and that the act of the law firm and the attorneys and the hearing examiner was absolutely fraudulent. Fraudulent. As far as the budget goes, you've got a $30 million budget, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked, that you spend $15 million on salary and benefits for the city staff. 50 cents of every dollar we spend is on staff and not the things we're trying to get traction on and accomplish. We used to run this city with 11, 7, much lower number of employees, and you're wasting money, and you guys are in charge of the purse strings, not Mr. Carlinzi. Do your job.
Elizabeth Mooney.
Elizabeth Mooney, Kenmore. So a couple things. Thank you very much for council coffee. I think what what I want to say is communication, and I absolutely have to say thank you to Tracy Bonazinski and Snow King Watershed Council. And I'm really happy that John Adamski is here. I just was on the phone today with Joan Hardy, who is like an algae. She's one of our Kenmore friends and an algae expert. So I think the communication in our community is increasing, and that's thanks also to PERC is having meetings here, and we even had it, during the power outage, met some new friends, and thank you for that, for nonprofits being able to do that monthly for free. So we are able to meet again, and if you think December 18th is a time to keep talking about all these things like Sammamish River, working on what John Adamski is talking about. There's some cedar trees that want to be given out to people to plant that Sally talked about at one of the meetings. But let's just keep communicating, because it's hard to email, and that kind of thing gets rough. But what I wanted to, sorry. Today, I want to thank Jim Howard. He really worked hard for several years. He was on the Planning Commission in the past. A lot of you know that. But he's been helping us in PERC and talking with folks in Snow King Watershed Council just about trying to communicate with you and with council members Sassoon and Culver and Jim Howard and Richard, whose last name I don't know. Council coffee is a really good time to talk, and thank you. So now I'm trying to tell my new friends in our neighborhood, first Monday, Hanger, 7:30. And I think that is like one of the most powerful places to talk. So please spread the word. And so if on December 18th, we all meet here at 4:30 for a PERC meeting, bring like your favorite subject and I don't know, maybe your favorite song you want to sing and some joy, and we can celebrate. There doesn't have to be a big agenda, but bring some light in your heart. And, you know, I think what would be lovely is when we build senior housing down there, that we think about the most vulnerable people might be near the state highway. And so I'm working on trying to learn more about air quality near highways and how to fit that into comp plans. And that's thanks to a lot of volunteer effort from one of our friends, Jim Howard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney. I do not see Corey Holder online, and we've been waiting. Therefore, this concludes our speakers list.
All right. That brings us to our consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Moved.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is adopted unanimously. Next up, we have a presentation on the Sammamish River Capital Investment Strategy update presented by Krista Karmazin, Deputy Division Director at WLRD, and Michelle Clark, Executive Director of the King County Flood Control District. Oh, and Richard Sawyer, of course, introduced by Richard Sawyer. My apologies.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor, City Council members. Thank you for having us here this evening. So yeah, I'm here to provide an update on the Sammamish River Capital Investment Strategy. I know a few of you have been interested in getting an update. It's been a little bit over a year since we've been able to provide an update on this project. And I'm very fortunate to have Michelle Clark, the Executive Director of the King County Flood Control District, joining me this evening, and Krista Cummington, the Deputy Director of the Water and Land Resources Division at King County. And so yeah, they're gonna help provide this update for you this evening. I'd be happy to turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you. I'm Michelle, as he said, the Executive Director of the King County Flood Control District. Some of you are new since the last time I was here, so I'll just give a real short introduction as to who we are and what we do. We are a special purpose district that is tasked with bringing flood risk reduction projects to fruition in King County. Our mission is to protect the life and property of residents of King County and to make the environment better as we do it. We've been around since 2007, working on over 500 individual flood reduction facilities throughout King County, or, you know, it's probably like if you put them end to end, over 300 miles of levees and revetments. And then some of the other things that we do besides levees and revetments, we purchase property to get folks out of the way of the water. We elevate homes. We're partnering with you all to make some property, take it back to what it's supposed to be, which is a wetland. And we just work with the 39 cities and the county to do this work. I would be remiss if I did not say that We are a small but mighty government of 3 staff. The 9 King County council members are my board of supervisors. And we contract with folks to do the work. I often call them the sciencey people because I'm just a policy girl. But our largest service provider is King County. Not just through the Water and Land Resources Division, which does a bulk of our work, but also we contract with the King County Council. That's how I have an office and a phone and a computer and all of that fun stuff. And I guess I can say that we raised our levy rate when we passed our 2025 budget as an acknowledgement that we've done a lot of good work, but we have a ton more work to do. And we are looking forward to continuing our partnership with, I think you guys are the most vocal city, the most vocal residents when it comes to the Sammamish Capital Investment Strategy. And with that brief introduction, I will turn it over to Krista Commons.
Thank you. I'm Krista. I'm the Deputy Division Director for Water and Land Resources at King County. And I'm here to give you an overview and an update on the capital investment strategy for the Sammamish River. I will say the project manager for this project recently got a new job, so I am pinch hitting tonight. I will do my best, but if you have complicated questions, I'll have to follow up via email. But nonetheless, here we go. So as an overview, the King County Flood Control District has this project to develop a capital investment and maintenance strategy that meets the flood risk habitat and navigability requirements for the Sammamish River. So just for context, a capital investment strategy is really a list of capital projects with some programmatic work, and we bucket them, we prioritize and bucket the projects by near term, medium term, and long term, and then we prioritize within those categories, and that then informs budget decision making. So it's really just a list of projects with some policy priorities applied to it. As the service provider, King County is the service provider to the district, we're working with other river management partners such as cities, tribes, the state, probably most importantly, the Army Corps, since the entire stretch of river is a Corps facility, as well as the public to develop the CIS. And ultimately, we're creating this policy document for the district to use. So as I said, the entire 13-mile stretch of the river is a flood facility. So it was originally called the Sammamish River Improvement Project back in the 60s. The Corps decided that in order to protect farmers from spring flooding, they needed to dredge and straighten the river. And thus we have the sort of streamlined river we have today rather than a meandering river that created the Sammamish Valley. The Corps created in 1964 an operations and maintenance manual that governs sort of the basics of what you can expect for flooding, how we're supposed to maintain the banks of the levee, et cetera. It's a 60-year-old document. It's out of date. We need to bring it up to date to, comply with the environment or the Endangered Species Act and other details like that. So we are in the process of working with the Corps to update that manual so it is a more modern document. So the goals of the project are first to update the manual for operations and maintenance. We also want to provide an updated multi-benefit capital investment and maintenance strategy that plans for and addresses current conditions as well as future conditions as climate change brings more severe weather to our region. And it's really important that we work with partners to develop an implementation strategy for the projects and to help to get some projects started as soon as we can. There is a lot of work to be done on the Sammamish River. A lot of jurisdictions are very interested, and there are a lot of potential for partnerships. I wanted to focus for a few minutes on a body of work that we did in 2023. It's very important for the district to hear from the community in creating these projects, both the district and the county and the city. We serve the public, and so we need to hear from the public to get their priorities and also to hear what they think of the plans that we come up with. So we started this outreach effort in March of 23. One of the objectives was just to let people know that we were doing this planning work so that they could engage and have some sense of what was happening. And we wanted to understand the needs of Riverside jurisdictions as well as potential projects and plans that cities might have for along the river. We did a bunch of in-person events to hear from the community, such as farmers markets and movies at Marymore Park. where we could just talk to people and hear what they had to say. We did specifically targeted outreach to some populations, historically underserved populations such as mobile home communities and the small business farmers, particularly in the Sammamish Valley. We did some technical workshops with the cities along the river to get a sense of what they were thinking needed to be done to protect their cities from flooding and to improve habitat. And then we did an online open house and survey. We had really good response, hundreds of people's engaged with us. And I just want to give you some highlights and some themes. So 66% of the respondents said that preserving and restoring the river's ecology and wildlife habitat was the most important thing to them. So that's a pretty overwhelming statement of support for habitat restoration on the river. Folks also mentioned water quality and a concern for human health and habitat. I think reminiscent of what we heard from one of the public commenters about algae in the lake and the river. Recreation, particularly walking and biking and wildlife viewing, going out and seeing the birds on the river was very popular. And when we asked folks where they most frequently engage with the river, over half said that they came to the end of the Sammamish River at Lake Washington, so hereabouts. So a lot of engagement in your community. In terms of next steps, we've sort of gone to ground after that community engagement, took in all that information, have been working with our consultants to do some technical work to start developing the manual in particular, but also how do we understand the different projects on the river and how we start to prioritize them. Once we've got those alternatives for how we might put together the capital investment strategy, we'll go for a second phase of outreach that'll be briefer, but similar in the sense of having community engagement and an online open house. And then we'll use those that feedback to inform recommendations. And what you see here is the final project work schedule to get us into the middle of next year. And this is just sort of phases of engagement that the county is going to do with the community and with the district, so that the district, is giving us clear guidance on what we should be sharing with the community and how we use that input to formulate the alternatives. So we're working on alternatives analysis now, should have that done in January of next year. Knock on wood, I'm going to say, given our project manager status. We'll then do our second round of outreach in February or March. So that might be a good time for us to come back and give you an update. We'll take all that back in, formalize a plan, work with the district, do the final bit of outreach so that folks can see where we think we're landing, and then ultimately go back to the district for review and approval so that they can then take it up as a policy document. Then you'll see here at the bottom, implementation is 2026 to 2046. So this is a long-term plan for how we will go about, in partnership with the district, supporting the river. We are going to have to be updating as we go along, getting feedback. Projects will be completed and new projects will come online. So it will be a living document for us as we go. All of which is to make sure that the district has the information it needs to budget and support projects along the river. And that's that.
Can I just add something really quick, Mayor? Two things. One, I'm going to brag on the outreach that King County did. When I was here with you all last time, I think I shared that it was sort of first of its kind effort to bring together all of the jurisdictions on the Sammamish and actually get a list of everything that you guys are doing so that we can all start from the same page in terms of what's needed and who of the partners gets to own what work. But that seems like a little thing. That was huge. That was groundbreaking, and that took a significant amount of work. And then the other thing that I will say is, wow, read that project milestone chart page with a grain of salt, right? That's our best shot. There are tons of places where things could go wrong in terms of not meeting those milestones. And I guess one of those would be if something were to happen and now there's a whole new project that we need to consider, things like that. So there's always wiggle room with the schedule.
Questions? Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, two questions. This is great. Thank you for coming. One is, I'll just ask both of them, then you can respond. How are you coordinating with some of our amazing nonprofit groups? Some are represented here, Snow King Watershed, for example. And And the other question is, can you give us a teaser at all of the type of projects that we might be looking forward to, maybe in the nearer term, 5-year horizon? Because it looked like you were looking at like a 20-year horizon.
I'll take the easy one. We sure do partner with nonprofits, and that was part of that outreach stage. So like Krista said, we did that outreach. We talked to our nonprofit partners. They've gone to ground to do some work, and then we're almost ready to daylight that work. And I would assume that those nonprofit partners would be rather vocal again in that process. And then I don't know if we have any projects that we
Yeah.
can share.
I don't know that we're at that stage yet. What I would say is, we do regular inspections of the river. There was one done in September. Got in the boat and I think motored down the river, taking a look at what was happening on the levee. So we see animals burrowing into the levee, weakening it. We see vegetation that needs to be maintained to become a native plant. This is one of the things we have to work out with the Corps, what kind of vegetation we can use. We have flap gates that don't work so that they don't kind of open and close as they're supposed to. We have culverts that are failing. So we have projects like that along the river. In terms of bigger projects, setback projects, I'm not aware of those yet, but they could well come out through our process.
I would also add that we do partner with nonprofits through our grant program, as well as through the cooperative watershed management grants, where you guys are in RIA 8. And I want to say that we probably fund about 90% of those projects through that grant process. And so I think that there are, say, water quality projects and those things moving forward. And that's based on the RIA 8 salmon recovery plan that you guys adopted as one of the jurisdictions there.
Councilmember Lutzis.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I appreciate that context. So I might be a little premature to talk about projects and things like that, but I did want to point up something. This isn't a question, but more of a comment, that the concern about navigability, especially around the mouth of the river, has been brought up to me specifically, not only by residents, but from some of our public safety partners too, in response with their first responder watercraft having trouble to be able to get up there efficiently. And I just want to put that out there. I know that's a bigger project. I know we're not at that stage, but I'm just going to put that out ahead of time. And that's something I'll keep bringing up. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Sassen.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here. I think I expected more of a laundry list of things that you've been working on and things that you are planning to work on. So I think I'm a little ahead of the game. I think I'm looking forward to what we might hear in 2025, hoping that we were going to hear it tonight. So I just want to acknowledge that for myself. And I do want to also acknowledge the concern that we have from our community, again, about the algae, the toxic algae. And I would like some reassurance from you that that is on the docket coming forward, if you can offer that.
So as part of the work that we do to create capital investment strategies, we also do work with consultants to look at the current conditions of the river. And so looking at algae bloom and water quality are definitely things that we do take into account and work with our partners. They're not always necessarily flood control projects per se, so it wouldn't necessarily make it onto the Sammamish capital investment strategy list, but it may well make it onto our flood reduction grant list that you guys have applied for in the past and been successful, or again, the RIA grants. I would also point you to other water type grants that exist out there. One's the King County Parks Levy has a levy, river improvement fund that looks to see if they can partner for passive recreation and or active recreation. Oftentimes that includes habitat and water restoration work for grants. And then as well as, going to be a little bit over my skis here, but Oftentimes waterworks grants come into play. So I think that there's a lot of different opportunities, and I'd love to talk to you offline about some of those.
I appreciate that. I did hear concern from some residents today about funding for potential restoration at Taquagis Park. And so I feel like you just provided me with where to look for that. I appreciate it.
City Manager.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Krista, as well. So the Cedar River is just a great example of how many miles of shoreline habitat restoration can get done with partnerships like Forterra over a long period of time, probably like 20 years. Can we have a vision for like that for the Sammamish River, where the Sammamish River can be restored at the same level as the Cedar?
I would love to be able to say yes. One of our biggest constraints, frankly, is that the Sammamish River is channelized. So it's just channelized, cement laden with the Army Corps of Engineers. If you've heard me talk a lot, right? They're not necessarily one of my favorite partners. We have done a lot to work with them, but they don't necessarily look at a holistic view of projects the way we do. So I can't for sure say that we would be looking at creating something like the Cedar simply because the Corps is involved so heavily here. But that definitely is one of the goals of the Board of Supervisors, which coincidentally are also the policymakers for the county. I think it would be great. One of the things that I think is in your favor is in King County, there's really two rivers that get dredged often. And that's both the mouth of the Sammamish and the mouth of the Cedar. And I think that we've learned ways that we can try to do that in conjunction with habitat work. So I'm hopeful we're able to take some of the lessons from the Cedar and apply them if the Army Corps lets us.
Any other questions or comments? No, I just want to say, it's exciting to have you here. This is a long time coming and we're very excited. At the mouth, kind of being at the bottom of the watershed like we are, we deal with all of the mistakes that were made upstream. And even though there's a long timeline on this, I think it's a huge benefit to the city and the region to put in this sort of work. And I want to thank you for that. I also just wanted to say to Michelle, I'm really excited about the project behind the police precinct and opening up some of that parking lot and getting it back to the wetlands there. I think that's just a wonderful project. So anyway, thank you very much for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This brings us to our first of two public hearings today. First one is proposed ordinance 240620, amendments to the Local Project Review Act, Chapter 3670B RCW, according to second substitute Senate Bill SB 5290, presented by Development Director Samantha Loyuk and Senior Permit Coordinator Andy Torres.
Good evening, Kenmore City Council. I'm Samantha, and with me is Andy Torres, our Senior Permit Coordinator. Andy has great experience in processing permits and especially the complex permit applications that we're going to talk about today. So he's going to be a great resource. And we will jump into SB 5290, as you mentioned, Senate Bill 5290. So what this is, the city of Kenmore is required by state legislation to amend its development regulations to comply with this bill. The bill amends the Local Project Review Act, which is Chapter 3670B RCW. And it's with the purpose of increasing the timeliness and predictability of local project review. So permit reviews. These amendments are intended to modernize and streamline local project review. And the project, SB 5290, went into effect July 23rd of 2023, except Section 7, which is going into effect January 1st, 2025. On this screen, you'll see the 5 bullet points that are the main items in Section 7. And so this is what we'll summarize, and then the ordinance that's provided is a reflection of compliance with 5290. So we have the big subject is updated local permit review timelines. That's a big one. There are clarifications regarding determination of completeness. There's a new exemption from a site plan review for certain interior projects that contain no exterior alterations. And then there are some updated annual reporting requirements, and then provisions for requiring partial permit refunds for failure to comply with timely processing of permits. So as we're kind of breaking up those few things, going into the annual reporting requirements, right now we already have the annual reporting requirements. This is going to change that by adding what's being called a shot clock. And so it's like a timer for permit applications when we start the review and when we stop it. And this is actually, it starts when an application is determined complete, and it's calculated in calendar days, not business days, for clarification. So as we're looking at all the date requirements, those are all calendar days. And so there are certain actions that can stop the clock. And that would be if it's requested by an applicant or if it's going out for corrections. So if we've asked for items to be corrected, we can then stop the clock. A key challenge to this new shot clock is that we don't have a permit system that has a feature to, how would I even say, to measure the time. Right now, we're working with mybuildingpermit.com. They've been a great partner, and they're working on the back-end system, which we've talked about. And I know Tyler Running Deer has come and talked to everyone here. And that's a central focus. So that's going to be great when that gets started. But until then, we will be manually tracking for reporting purposes. So there will be an additional workload there. So that's the reporting aspect of it. And then there's refunds. So if we're not meeting the timelines that I'm going to go over, then we may be required to refund a portion of the fee. Now that is if we were to just adopt SB 5290 prescriptively. So if we didn't make any modifications to it in our ordinance, we would be required to provide a partial refund. But the bill says that we can avoid the refund by implementing certain process improvements. Oops. So it's saying they're calling these continuous efforts towards meeting these goals of timelines. And they're very, very specific. There's a list of 10 items, and you have to pick a minimum of 3 to avoid potential refunds. And so we've done that. Those are listed in the bill. So that we won't be subject to the refunds. And we're doing more than just the 3, actually. Okay, now to the good stuff, the plan review times. So right now, this is our current deadline to issue a decision. And what we're talking about are, as you can see, 1, 2, and 3, certain projects are broken up into projects that do not require public notice. So like a boundary line adjustment, right? That doesn't require public notice. Second is projects that do require public notice. So like a short plat or a reasonable use exception. And then 3, projects that require a public notice and a public hearing. And that would be like a formal subdivision. So a plat of 10 or more lots. So right now our code says we have 120 calendar days. But there's there's like an asterisk in the code right now that says, but if you can't make that, you have to tell the applicant that and explain why. And you'll see our current review times after here that I'm going to give it away. We don't meet it a lot of the time, and we have to tell the applicant, based on limited staffing and the complexity of the projects that we have in, here's our estimated review time, and we kind of give that to them. And that's right now how we do it. But the new prescriptive deadlines that are in SB 5290, so this is just out of the box, they range from 65 days to 170. So it's now this sliding scale depending on the project type instead of the 120 calendar days. And there's a reporting requirement, right? So they're making sure you're really making these deadlines. But before we get into what the proposed ordinance is, Andy can speak to our current review times.
Thank you. So current review times for projects that do not require public notice as shown on the screen can include home occupation, boundary line adjustment, shoreline exemption, tree removal permits. Thankfully, at this time, we do meet, for the most part, the requirement that will be implemented starting next year. Boundary line adjustments do become a little more complex, and we are working to, we're continuing to work on being able to comply with the timelines that will be required by us. For type 2 projects that require public notice, that include preliminary short subdivision, zoning variance, reasonable use exception, conditional use permits, site plan application. This is where we start getting into the more complex projects that do require a lot of reviews, not just internally, but other agencies as well outside of development services, which is a challenge because we are not able to have requirements for them to respond to us in a specific timeframe. So we do our best to work with those agencies to try and receive any kind of comments for projects that are coming along the way to be able to provide them in a timely manner for the applicants. Type 3 projects that require public notice and a public hearing, as Sam was mentioning, are larger, long subdivisions and things of more complex projects, I believe multifamily, multi-use.
Anything with a public hearing, it's most commonly will be the we call them long plats or formal subdivisions would be a type 3.
And these, again, be due to the complexity of the application process and the outside agencies that we work with are not meeting at this time the requirements that will be in play next year. But we are continuing to update our internal standard procedures to best get to the goal of reducing the calendar days of these more complex projects.
But there's hope. The bill provides some much needed flexibility. So there are, it's not just the standard across the board. So the bill does say that everything should be 170 days or less, but that it can be up to 170 days. So what's proposed in the ordinance is for type 2 and 3s to stay at 170, and then for type 1s to be 100, because I think that is more in line with what we're doing right now, and that's attainable. I wouldn't want to expand that deadline to 170 because I think that's like giving us too much time almost. So the ordinance before you proposes the times shown here. And then we're implementing 3 of the 10 options described in the ordinance. We've adopted the allowable exemptions under the RCW. And part of the options or the efficiency options include outsourcing or contracting overflow reviews in times of peak volumes. We do that anyway, but we do have to budget for it. So that's something that's included with this under the existing budget. So it's like we get credit for that one as one of the 3 options. We're also in 2025 employing a department-wide efficiency improvement program. And so a lot of that is focused on our permit tracking system and improvements to the existing system that we can make, and then really working with mybuildingpermit.com for the back-end system to develop something that's going to be better for us long-term so we can help meet these requirements. And then also as part of the proposal, we are looking at the end of 2025 to do kind of a recap to say, okay, here's what we proposed under SB 5290, and here's where we are. Here's what we're meeting or not meeting, which we'll be able to see during the reporting requirements as well. But I think at the end of the year, it will give us a better understanding of what that's really going to look like. So that was a lot of information. But hopefully the agenda bill spells it out, as well as the annotated 5290 bill, where we went through and along the margins marked everything so you could see where that's incorporated into the draft code. This was a kind of a bear of a code, so thank you to Don Rayton for your help and to Andy. And that's what we have for the presentation. Next is public hearing or questions.
Questions, Councilmember Marshall?
Thank you. Did either the bill or the ordinance make any changes to public comment, public response, notice, or appeal time periods?
No.
And did the bill come with any funding?
There were some funding options for grants, but they were very limited and with a lot of strings attached that we could not meet those requirements.
That like a time crunch, maybe, or elaborate a little bit on?
Committing to a lot of the reduced timeframes, and basically, and it was pretty limited. So it wasn't something that we qualified for.
We didn't think we'd probably realistically be able to achieve it, right? With those.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I
All right.
attended a few of the workshops and it's not something that we would be able to achieve.
And if I could jump in on that, they were one-time grants, right?
Correct.
So they weren't going to help us with the ongoing resource that we need. Yeah.
Councilor Lutzis?
Yes, with those options that we're picking in order to show that we're making improvement, is there a deadline on that, or can we continue to budget for the use of consultants and peak periods and things like that?
I don't think that there's a timeline for it. I know that we have to select the at least three by January 1st. Otherwise, we would be subject to the refunds.
But we can keep those three for as long as
We
we
can
need to?
keep those unless after reporting, if we're reporting there and they say, hey, you're still not making these timelines of at least half your applications are not meeting, then they kind of put us in the next step. They're like, all right, you have to employ more of these, or, you know, something. They're kind of like upping the ante each time to try to bring us closer.
Sure. Yeah, but there's not like, we can lean on these as long as they're working indefinitely.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Culver?
Thank you. A couple of questions. You mentioned, I hope I'm getting this right, other agencies sometimes kind of holding up the queue with responses or input or those sorts of things. I might have missed it, but could you give us some examples of that? Like, what are the subjects that come up, or who are the folks, if you feel like naming names even?
Okay, well, we love our partnering agencies,
Yes,
but
we do.
recognize they have a lot of other things to do. But just for example, North Shore Utility District they have their own permitting process, and they also review our land use applications. And so sometimes the timeliness in getting those back can be challenging. Other examples are if we need like a plat map reviewed by a surveyor. We don't have a surveyor on staff, so that would be like a consultant's review. And we can kind of keep pushing on them a little bit more than our outside partners. But North Shore Utility is great. We love them and work really well with them, but I get it. Sometimes they slow us down a little.
Okay, 10-4, I like it. I had another question. This sort of active development effort with my building permit to kind of get it in a little better form, or however we want to say that. Are other cities involved in that, or is that just Kenmore?
Yeah, so it's part of the eGov Alliance, and Rob is on the board, I believe. And so it is a group of cities who are working on this together. And I believe there's also a proposal that's going to the state that they're considering this as part of a statewide permitting system. But there is a coalition of cities who were all trying to, comply with this new requirement. And so we're all in the boat together. And my building permit is helping us with that, with the current front end system of online and then this back end system that they're developing.
And if I could help answer that as well. So it's several cities that are putting skin in the game on that back end system, but also 2 counties, King County and Clark County.
And just to be clear, I know that there's other cities involved, and it sounds like this answer is yes, but I just want to make sure. Those other entities are also involved in this kind of guinea pig process, this iterative trial, we're developing it and changing it, like we're all in this together. Is that accurate? I'm seeing heading nods. Okay, cool. That's all I got. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, thank you. So 2 questions. And I have to say, I didn't read every word of the original bill. Often with, wax and compliance, we're talking about a level of compliance, right? I mean, it's 95% or 90%, or, do you have a sense of what, if we were to, get to we have a particular target, whether it's 170 or 100, what is the level of compliance that we're looking at?
That we think that we'll be able to achieve with
Well, that they
this?
were asking in the
Oh,
original.
I believe it was 50% is where it
Okay.
said if at least 50% of the reporting permits are not in compliance, then we move
Okay.
in to the next step.
Okay,
That's my
so that's
understanding.
pretty generous. So it's not an average, it's just 50%. So your outliers are just your outliers, and that's fine. I guess I'm fairly certain that those original timeframes that are actually not in our packet, but you presented, I think it was your slide 4. I think there was something like 65 and 100 and something else. I don't have it in front of me. I'm guessing those were made thoughtfully. I'm guessing they got input. I don't know the process, but I guess I would love it if we could aspire to those. We want to make our community attractive to developers of all stripes, commercial, residential, the whole thing. I guess I'd push us to think, how can we get to those goals? Maybe we're at, X now, but for example, that 100 for the first category instead of 65, let's shoot for 65. I think it looks like, I don't know the percentages of all those different categories, so I can't tell if we were already there, but it looks like we probably were pretty close. And similarly, again, without knowing the percentage that we're under and over, it's impossible to tell how close we are. But I would love it if we could think about what would it take to get to the stronger goal, the shorter timeframes, rather than trying to do workarounds and what are the streamlining efforts? What are the staffing efforts? What would it take to make us a very attractive city to developers?
Any other questions or comments before Councilmember Sassen?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but would the mybuildingpermit.com backend system address some of Councilmember Shrubnik's, that part of the answer?
It is definitely part of the answer. That would improve efficiencies and help us track permits better.
And do we have some sense of timeline on when that they think that backend system will be, a range?
Yeah, we're going to be asking for the state funding in this, this next legislative session. And they've already gone through an RFP process and selected a preliminary developer to start working on it, but they're going to wait until they see if they get the state funding before they give the green light. And then after that, can't remember the timeline, but it's a good year, if not 2 years after that.
Any other questions or comments before I open up the public hearing?
Just one general comment. I really appreciate Samantha and her team for trying to navigate through this unfunded mandate. I know the state legislature's intentions are good here, and we have the same intentions. We want to turn around permits as quickly and efficiently as possible. And in fact, our three-pronged approach to economic development, the number one thing in our three-pronged approach is run a good city. And having a good permitting system and predictable timelines and processes is really important part of running a good city. So I'm thankful to Samantha for the ideas she's come up with. Thankful to you all for adding a little bit more staffing in the development services budget that you just adopted last week. So hopefully with all those things, we'll be able to come in closer to compliance with the new state law. So thank you.
Check for questions or comments for the public hearing is open. All right, I'm not seeing any. So for the public hearing, folks will be granted 3 minutes to speak. Same public comment rules apply, including saying your name and city of residence and addressing your comments directly to the city council. Somebody's already fully expressed your views. We encourage you to state your name, city of residence, and say, I agree with the previous speaker. We'll hear testimony from our on-site guests first, followed by pre-registered virtual guests. Thank you for taking the time to participate in the public hearing. I declare the public hearing open. Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. We have one guest on site wishing to speak, Patrick O'Brien.
Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. First of all, I was here when they put up some of the code in a meeting a week ago, I believe. And the code had many references to diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of the code. And I'm thinking, well, who's the arbiter of that? How is that equality that we're all granted under the Constitution? Are you folks, staff? Who's in charge of determining diversity, equity, and equality? It's not in the Constitution, it's illegal. And I think you'll see under this next presidential administration that stuff's going out the window because it's a fundamental slap in the face to our Constitution. You might not think so, but who is it that's going to be the arbiter of that? So let's remove that language from our code. It's not germane to code. Next is, it sounds like this is kind of an expedited way to get permits for Lake Point through and other such projects, maybe the maintenance facility. And what it's really hopefully encouraging is public comment and a voice of opposition and having being able to air those concerns to you as the representatives of the people of Kenmore. And I don't see any reference to that. I don't see the public being able to talk for like 5 minutes. I don't see, I saw what was up there and I wasn't sure what all that meant, but I did see where it wasn't required to have public notice for some shoreline permitting. And I think it's very important that the public be fully informed on what's going on the shoreline. So I would amend that to not include that as something that didn't go under total public scrutiny. So that's about it. I think the public, it really doesn't know how this is going to affect them, but I think a red line review of code of how it's changed would be something important for you to look at and see what that could mean to the public who, after all, is the one that's supposed to follow those guidelines. Thank you.
Mayor Herbig, that concludes our speakers list.
Is there anybody else present wishing to be heard? Anybody else present wishing to be heard? Last call. Anybody else present wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I'm declaring the public hearing closed. That brings us to our second public hearing, temporary use permit number TMP 24-0795 to construction and trade as a temporary use for the interim public workshop for a 1-year period at real property located at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way, presented by Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk and Public Works Operation Director Jennifer Gordon.
Well, hello again. Okay, so I'm Samantha. I'm here from the regulatory perspective, and Jennifer is here on behalf of the applicant because it's a city use. So the item before you is a request for a 1-year renewal of the temporary use permit for the interim public workshop located at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way, also known as the old Shell property. This use is classified as a construction and trade and requires a temporary use permit to operate in the downtown commercial zone. Temporary use permits exceeding 90 days require a public hearing and council approval for up to 1 year. They may be renewed in 1-year increments at council's discretion following a public hearing. As such, we're here. The Development Services Department finds that the project meets the decisional criteria of the code and recommends approval of the temporary use permit application. Jennifer is available to address questions related to logistics of the site or future public works location.
Do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so yeah, Mr. City Manager.
Well, hopefully we won't have to do this for too much longer, just maybe one more time, hopefully.
That's my hope, one
Yeah.
more time.
Yeah, so hopefully you won't have this keep coming back every year like we have for the last, how many, 6 years, something like that.
Well, since 2019.
Yeah. Cross your fingers.
I'm starting to view this ordinance as a, a bit of a timekeeper for myself, like Christmas is coming up because we're extending the public works facility. No further okay, there aren't any questions. We'll open the public hearing. Same rules apply that I just laid out. We'll hear from on-site guests first, and then anybody who's online. I declare the public hearing open. Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. We have 1 guest on site wishing to speak and 0 guests online. Patrick O'Brien.
O'Brien, Kenmore. We have that site, and we have used it very well, I think, over the years. It's certainly accessible to 522, but that also means that we should be able to talk about the maintenance facility, where it's located, and the excessive budget for that. It's going to be more than $30 million, which is your total annual budget. So there was no call out by the public for a new maintenance facility, and other options, as you know, were available, passed over, and lied about. There was a secret deal by Rob Carlinzi for not electing to select the old fire station. And I think it's been shown that there is going to be a parking garage on that site, and it's going to affect the Heron. So as far as budgetary requirements for the maintenance facility goes, you have not scrutinized the process, and illegal things have happened. Not only that, we've been in meetings with staff, and they lied about the impact and the wetlands that is on various properties and the property that you acquired to put the maintenance facility on. So I think you really need to look at projects like this, and whatever you do with that property that you just extended the use of. I was driving through Bothell today, and I saw how close the buildings are and how tall they are next to 522. And I hope we don't do anything like that because that is really not good looking. That is not inviting. That is, you know, a planned ghetto. The building materials in that building will not last more than 20 years. And that's just basically wrong. So I'd love to work with you on where density could be. And I'm sure you'll hear from me. Thank you.
Mayor Herbert, there are no additional speakers.
Is there anybody else present wishing to be heard? Anybody else present wishing to be heard? Last call. Anybody else present wishing to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is declared closed. That brings us to our business agenda. First item, resolution in support of Shoreline Fire Department, North Shore Fire Department, Proposition 1, proposed formation of Shoreline Fire Department Regional Fire Authority. We're not getting a staff report on this or anything. We know what we're discussing here.
I thought we would have Chief Cowan just come up briefly just to summarize what was talked about last week.
Chief.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and City Manager for allowing me to come back and potentially considering this resolution for support. I'll be brief. Was there any questions that had popped up over this last week or anything else that you needed more details?
Councilor Marshall.
Thank you. And if this is appropriate to answer, or if it's not, and I apologize, I don't know the answer. Does the union take a official position on this question, and have they?
Yes, they have, and they're in full support of it, and have, you know, participated as appropriately in not only asking questions on development and so forth.
Any other questions for the chief? Councilor Shrubnik.
Yeah, thank you for coming again. You know, just there have been some folks in the public who, you know, say that like Forest Park and Kenmore would be subsidizing the rest of the district. I thought I'd give you an opportunity to talk about that a little bit. Of course, the mill rate, if your property value is higher, is going to be lower if you're equalizing with the rest of the district. But so I guess I wanted to get a sense of, you know, how does that work? If you've got 3 cities, is it one mill rate for the whole region then? Or how, you know, how does that work? If it's one mill rate, then we would be subsidizing. You know, also just, you know, paraphrasing the expected benefits. You spoke to this before as well, but if you could just recap that, that would be great.
Right. Do we happen to have the presentation that I had from last week available? Sorry, Michelle. I might be right in front of me even. Oh, is it that one? There it goes. So that's a great question, and it's one that we've dived into. Very nice work. Thank you. So there is we did dive into the financial pieces of this quite extensively, trying to make sure that we were identifying the different pros and cons throughout. There's actually some pretty substantial financial savings that can occur from the efficiencies and so forth. So at first, it's counterintuitive at first when you look at the mill rate. And if you'll look on the screen there, there's what we're showing there is $1.16.6 in the middle there. That's what we're predicting, and that's what it's going to be about for next year for Shoreline, and $1.12.5 for the North Shore Fire District. And right to the right of that, you'll see it's just under $1.08 equivalent levy rate. And you see, one of those things would be like, well, how can it be less than the lowest one if we're combining things? And that's again, from some of the efficiencies that will occur. We have millions of dollars that we can reapply to keeping the levy rate low or reinvesting in levels of service or a combination thereof, savings to the taxpayers and so forth. So we have taken a look at that. There, 100%, it's realistically 100% of all single family homeowners will see a decrease in their overall revenues that they have to contribute under the RFA, and 98% of all property owners. There will be some commercial and multifamilies that will bear a little bit of the brunt. That's our estimate at this point. These savings, of course, won't occur until the end of next year as we budget for 2026. But I did this spreadsheet as an apples to apples comparison. So that's the first part. The second part of the subsidizing thing that has been a point of contention. I wanted to show here, this is a graph that shows in the blue is the shoreline assessed valuation, that faint one down towards the bottom, and how much is being contributed towards operational expenses up at the top. And the same thing with the North Shore Fire Department. The North Shore Fire Department doesn't have as many diversified revenue streams as Shoreline. And so that's why there's a bigger difference between those lines in the graph. And if you were looking at a percentage of the staffing costs, operational costs, that would be balanced between the Shoreline and North Shore Fire District, that's that percentage up there of the 61.5%. But Shoreline's actually contributing about 76.5%. And that's because of that diversified revenue stream and because of some of those other contracts that Shoreline has. This will probably only grow as there's a bit more growth that's going on, especially compared to Lake Forest Park. Kenmore's growing, of course, but Shoreline's growing, fairly quickly right now. We're all seeing kind of those balancing. But that's also one of the benefits of the RFA, is that as we get together and put everything together, homogenize and averages out all of those different impacts. And so you'll see less of these swings that are occurring throughout each of the different communities. And so, and to answer your question, like hopefully completely, sorry, it was a longer one. There will be one mill rate across the entire region as we consolidate all those things, but it'll be a lesser mill rate than that we're experiencing right now in any of the communities.
Any other questions? Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. Wanted to dig into something that jumped out at me. Maybe this is saying too much, but on the local control piece, which some folks have brought up about governance and what this looks like. It's a 10-person structure, so it's 2 boards of 5 merging together, making 10. We are 40% of the district between Kenmore and Lake Forest Park, but being a 10-person board, we get 50% of the representation. So we're actually overrepresented, where we get somewhat disproportionate voting power. That's a great thing, especially, don't tell Shoreline. Yeah, so especially as the dynamics change, like you were saying, with growth and stuff, maybe that's something that comes to be kind of reassessed. I don't know, who knows what the future looks like, but I thought that was worth noting on the local governance front, so yeah.
Thank you, and I will touch on that just really briefly in that it was a very important to my board, both boards of commissioners, and everybody that was involved, to make sure that there was representation from the different communities, to make sure that there wasn't. It would be far simpler to have just said it's a vote of the entire new organization to populate 7, 10, 15, not 15, please, different governance and those electeds. But we felt that this was at least a start to make sure that there was equal representation. I would like to get less than 10 longer term, and we may get there through attrition and through some changes, but it'll take a majority vote of the boards to do so. So that means it's not one geographical side, outweighing the other. And my hope is that, longer term, that we won't be looking at these as different jurisdictions. We'll be looking at this as we're all one and being collaborative. So longer term, I think, we'll see some of that, some of those numbers, potentially lessen.
Cool, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All
I
right.
would like to make one final thing because there was a point, because it's been brought up a number of times of like, oh, we could do this on our, our own without being in an RFA under an ILA, which is what we're under now, interlocal agreement. And there's just, some of these things cannot be accomplished without a long-term commitment and in an RFA. Those redundancies that I was talking about would have to remain to make sure that each of the fire districts were protected, especially with carryover and so forth. So there are some things that we just can't get all the way as far as we want to get with those efficiencies. So I just want to make my last point there.
Thank you. Well, now pursuant to RCW 4217A 555-1, members of the public are afforded an approximately equal opportunity for expression of an opposing view. Did anybody sign up, clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. We have two guests on site wishing to speak on this issue, Patrick O'Brien followed by Eric Admin, and one guest, Corey Holder, online.
Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. It all sounds very nice and rosy, but I'm not in favor of it for one reason. We don't have adequate fire support on the south side of the Sammamish Slough. All of Finn Hill, the major high school, junior high, we don't have fire assets over there. And as we just heard from Washington State or the King County Water Council, is there's a watershed called Lake Sammamish that has an earthen dam. It's a weir system that if it lets go, that bridge is gone. All bridges on the Sammamish River are gone. They want to sell the old fire station at Arrowhead. There's no plans to ever bring Medic 1 here or any equal, lesser costing one. And so I say to you, if you think 15 minutes from Shoreline to get Medic 1 here is going to save somebody's life, you're wrong. I had my mother, her life was saved, and the fire station was luckily the one on Juanita Drive and Holmes Point Drive. They were there in 3 minutes. That's what it takes to save a life, and they're not offering that. We're also losing local control of our assets. We paid a lot of money for that fire station. There's resources there. It'd be great to save 16 cents on the millage rate. Wonderful, great, but that's not local control. We want a public vote on this issue. I find that last week we're in violation of RCW 42-17A 555. There was not equal time given for the public to address this. He was afforded 20 minutes and a presentation. I would like to see Dave Marins and some other votes, that the other people that are in opposition to this plan before you ever vote on it. I think it's very important. If you have a kid that goes down at an athletic competition or a drug overdose at Inglemoor, how long is it going to take Medic 1 to get from Shoreline? They're not our closest neighbor. Kirkland is, but there's some sort of a spat between Kirkland and North Shore. I can't resolve that, but it certainly does not behoove us to give up control of our fire district to Shoreline. They are a much bigger place. Their call rate is going to be higher, and they're going to dwindle our resources. Don't do it. Have a public vote, take it out of your hands, and see how the people of Kenmore feel. And I guarantee you everybody on Finn Hill is going to be in opposition to this because we do not have adequate fire protection on Finn Hill or at the state park. So think about that. Thank you.
Eric Admin.
Greetings, Mayor, Council, and staff. Thank you for your service. I'm Eric Admin. I'm a resident of Kenmore, and I'm a North Shore Fire Commissioner. I'm here to thank you for your support for the upcoming our Regional Fire Authority ballot measure and share some reasons that I feel that the RFA will be beneficial. First of all, the contract for service between North Shore and Shoreline has already led to efficiencies and service improvements. These include we now have better continuity of care for our patients. Previously, North Shore, being a small 2-station department, had to, with one aid car, used to rely solely on private ambulance for transport. Now we predominantly have the same Shoreline fire personnel who respond initially to the emergency, take that patient to the hospital. That's better for patients and better for the EMTs themselves. We have better staffed and trained specialty teams, including our rescue team out of Station 51. We have also added an additional mobile integrated health unit, so people in crisis are better supported and connected to resources. And our fire prevention resources are much stronger locally in the North Shore as well. We've also been able to eliminate some administrative redundancies and strengthen our overall administrative capabilities. Second major reason is the RFA plan ensures that Kenmore and Lake Forest Park communities will continue to be well represented, in fact, somewhat overrepresented per capita. From a funding standpoint, for us, it's essentially a very similar model to a fire district that has the same basic mechanism, but with additional efficiencies. And really the major benefit that we're getting with this is that it's a long-term organization. So this removes the uncertainty that a short-term contract for service would have, so that the organizational and community benefits that we have are guaranteed for the future. So thank you again for your support.
Thank you. And now moving on to our online guest, Corey Holder. Corey, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Go on.
Okay, yeah, I guess Pat O'Brien pretty much hit all the comments that I was going to make tonight. I think maybe need some more reassurances that we can get service to south of the Sammamish before we go on this venture, but that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, that concludes our speakers list.
Thank you. All right, well, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt resolution 24-423 in support of Shoreline and North Shore Fire Department Proposition 1 Regional Fire Authority.
So moved.
Second.
I'm gonna give that one to Councilmember Lutzis on the second. Discussion, any discussion? Councilmember Lutzis and then Councilmember Culver.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say, when it comes to public safety, including fire and rescue, it's a basic function of local governance, whether it's from the city or from a fire commission. And I personally will support increases in the level of service, especially when that comes with other efficiencies, such as a reduced rate for property owners. And it seems like because of our existing relationship right now, or excuse me, North Shores with Shoreline through the interlocal agreement, it seems like this is the next logical step in what has already been in motion for several years. It doesn't change the level of service or anything like that. In fact, it increases efficiencies and helps property owners and taxpayers. And so I'm in support of that.
Councilmember Culver.
Thank you. Yes, I am clearly in support. Regionalization has been a goal for a long time. ILA has been working well. This just enhances and kind of solidifies that relationship. So yeah, I think this makes total sense. Just wanted to clarify procedurally, this will be on the February special election ballot. So will be put to a vote and I hope we endorse. So thank you.
Further comments? All right, seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve resolution number 24-423, expressing support of the Shoreline and North Shore Fire Department Proposition number 1, a proposed formation of a regional fire authority. Councilmember Sassen.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Culver.
Yes.
Councilmember Lutzis.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Thank you very much for coming, Chief.
Thank you very much for the support and asking some good questions. Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, proposed ordinance 240620, amendments to the Local Project Review Act. I'm not going to read the whole thing. We just did a public hearing on it. Presented by Development Director Samantha Luke and Senior Permit Coordinator Andy Torres. Anything additional to add?
Nothing to add.
Do you have any questions for staff? I just had Councilmember Shrubnik.
Just a follow up. I mean, do we have any data on how close we are to the originally proposed 65, 100 and 170 timeframes?
So based on the data that we do have for the current review timelines, that's why the the 170 days were proposed so that we could be in compliance. And then there's a plan to come back at the end of 2025. The goal is to meet the prescriptive timeframes.
I understand.
But
Yeah.
I don't
yeah.
want to be out of compliance and then they're moving us to the next step. So that's
Okay.
why I put more realistic timeframes in there and with a kind of circle back at the end of
Ye-
2025.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is like, yeah, I mean, if the threshold is 50%, I mean, are we at 10%? Are we at, I mean, what are we at?
Sorry, I don't
Is
have
it-
that number.
Okay, okay.
Councilor Lutzis?
Just a quick question. Are existing projects in the permitting pipeline sort of grandfathered in come January 1st? We don't start the clock on January 1 for what we're already working on.
Says, I believe it's projects that are received on or after January 1st is when we start.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions, unless anybody else has their hands up. And this is mostly in response to public comment, but I just wanted to get some clarification for the public. I went through the code that is being proposed in Exhibit A. And I searched for the words diversity, the word equity, and the word inclusion in there. I couldn't find those anywhere. Does this have anything to do with DEI?
No, I think he was referring to a different code. It's not.
Well, that was,
part
the
of
public hearing
this.
was on this one, so I just wanted to make sure that
Correct. That's
Okay.
not part of this ordinance.
I didn't think so. And then attachment A that we have in the packet appears to be what most people would refer to as a redlined version of the code, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we did have that in the packet, just so the public's aware, and it is available to review, and we all went through it before we got here. So I just want to make sure those were addressed because they were said in public. Any further questions? All right, seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve proposed ordinance number 24-0620.
So moved.
I'll second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve ordinance 24-0620, Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes, the ordinance is adopted unanimously. That brings us back to temporary use permit number TMP 24-0795 for the public workshop. Anything additional to add?
Nothing to add.
Not at this time.
Any questions for staff? Okay, seeing no questions, the chair would entertain a motion to approve temporary use permit number TMP 24-0795.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On that motion, Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Which brings us to our final item of the business agenda, City of Kenmore Picnic Shelter Rental Policies, presented by Public Works Operations Director Jennifer Gordon and Recreation Program Supervisor Marita Colburn.
Sure. Well, hello again. Michelle's going to bring up the policy just so we have something in front of us. I don't have a formal presentation for tonight. But we're here tonight to discuss picnic shelter policy, rental policies. And tonight's just for discussion. I'm not really asking for a formal motion tonight, mostly to present to you this is just really a basic rental policy for our picnic shelters. Want to get any feedback, input from you all, anything you'd like to see different in the policy. And I can bring that back to you in January for a formal adoption. So I'll just go over the agenda bill summary here. The past 20 years or so, the senior center over at Rhododendron Park has been operating the picnic shelter rentals. And we've only had the one picnic shelter at Rhododendron Park historically. So with the recent projects we've had, adding picnic shelters at Tlackwadiz, Lagboom Park, and at Morelands Park. We now have a total of 4 picnic shelters in the city. And we had been talking about bringing these in-house and offering these up as a rental, a reservable, rentable space during those projects. And we're finally getting around to actually bringing this to council for a formal adoption. So with that, the policy itself really is not going to refer to any of the rental fees, but I did want to include the rental fee information to the agenda bill. So if you have any additional questions, but I know Councilmember Srebnick brought up last time we discussed this about the level of the fees, the high cost of the fees, but our fees have actually been the same since 2019. So we've maintained the same fees for, a significantly long time. And we, I would say we are in line with all of the comparable cities around us. So the last thing that I mentioned in the agenda bill is to include a potential fee waiver for low-income residents. I'd like to push that into the fee schedule so that we're not, gumming up the policy itself, so that we can maintain that with the fees. Everybody can go to one area to look at fees, which is the fee schedule, and we can make those changes easily on an annual basis. The fees have been in existence in the fee schedule since, I believe, 2019, or actually 2008, in the 2018 fee schedule. And we just had that in there so that the senior center could charge those fees to our residents or non-residents for the rentals. And the only change we made this last year in the fee schedule in the fall was to cross out only Rhododendron Park and to include all of the picnic shelters for the coming year. So with that, take any questions you have, any specific questions about the policy or any comments?
Councilor Lutzis?
When picnic shelters aren't being rented, they're still open for use by the public at a first come, first served basis, correct?
Yes, the picnic shelters are available dawn to dusk, just the open hours of the park on a first come, first served basis when, and anytime the shelters are not under a reservation.
Yeah, I thank you for including that reference to fee reductions and fee waivers. I think it's also, relevant to point out too that, you can still use the shelters without having to pay any fee, without going through that process. And so I actually think it might be best to point that out potentially in this policy, maybe by adding some wording under the availability section following the second paragraph, something that might read along the lines of, when a picnic shelter has not been reserved, it may be used by individuals or groups on a first come, first served basis without fee. All general public users must abide by the community rules and user requirements outlined in this policy. And then that way, I think that points that out.
Makes sense.
Any other questions or comments, Councilmember Sassen?
I just want to express my gratitude for the inclusion of the low income waiver, however that will be structured in fees. And I agree, I'd like to see it represented just as a statement of commitment in the policy. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Let me see this. It's going to be for approval, so speak now. All right.
The only thing I was going to add when I bring this back in January, once we get the formal policy adopted, we'll come back for an amendment to the fee schedule to talk about the fee waiver, but my intention would be to follow along the same lines as what we do for permit fee waivers currently, which is offering at or below 80% AMI is what we have offered for the fee waivers for the permits themselves. So I'd like to keep it as consistent as possible.
Quick question that popped in my head. What is the difference between resident and non-residential fees? If you know.
Yeah, they're in the agenda bill. So no, it's okay. The current fees for resident half-day rentals, $75, a full-day rentals, $150, as opposed to the non-resident half-day, $100, full-day is $200.
Sorry, yeah, thank you.
That's okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll see you in January. Thank you.
That brings us to staff reports. Public Works Operations Center bond issue update presented by City Manager Rob Carl-Lindsay, Finance and Administration Director Melinda Merrill. Dave Tregeser, Managing Director at D.A. Davidson and Company, and Deanna Gregory, Partner at Pacifica Law Group.
And our guests are online and they'll be joining us in a second.
Good evening, Council. We are looking forward to giving you this recap of the bond issue that happened last week. So as you recall, it was just about a year ago that we brought to you an ordinance for the delegation of authority to issue bonds for the Public Works Operations Center. So we have finally seen that to fruition. The bond issue happened on November 26th, first thing in the morning. We were working with D.A. Davidson and Pacifica Law Group, who are both, Dave and Deanna are online with us tonight. And the bonds make up another piece of the puzzle to fund this project. So we have two other loans or amounts of money that are out there that are assisting with the total cost, which is $22.5 million. The terms of the bond are well within what was approved back a year ago. So we're excited about showing you those details as well. The bonds are sold at a premium. So we brought in the $12.5 million that we were wanting at a premium, and we will get the money on December 10th. And the project will hopefully be completed by the end of 2026. So that's kind of a summary of what is in the memo for you. I'll see if Rob wants to, no, Rob doesn't want to add anything. I believe Dave Tregeser is online, Managing Director. And with D.A. Davidson, is he available? Yes. And he is going to go over this slideshow.
Thank you very much, Melinda, and good evening, Council. Pleasure to be here. Dave Tregeser, Managing Director for D.A. Davidson. We acted as your bond underwriter for the sale. And I was asked to give a brief recap of the events of last week that Melinda mentioned. It was a public offering. The bonds were sold at low tax exempt rates throughout the country, given the city's strong credit rating. Next slide, please. To get into the market, we went back to Standard & Poor's, which is an independent credit rating agency, to request a review of the city's credit. And we hadn't been reviewed for 3 years since they instituted a new methodology. But as you can see, and I know that Rob had attached a copy of the complete report, recap is shown here with the bullet points of the credit strengths of the city, growing economy, healthy reserves, favorable debt profile, your budgeting practices, regular financial updates to the council, all long-term financial planning, all very positive. Rating agencies evaluate 4 areas: debt, finances, economy, and management. And Kenmore is one of only 12 Washington cities to receive the highest rating available, AAA. There are 2 additional cities that receive an equivalent rating from Moody's, so a proud accomplishment. And that laid a good foundation for the bond sale, which I'll talk about in a second. Next slide, please. Just a quick recap of what's been going on in the tax exempt bond market. This is over a 20-year history. You can see on the right, that's the pandemic when we were at all-time lows, around 2% with the market. This is a composite of what we call a bond buyer index of AA rated bonds. Since the pandemic, interest rates have gone up and down, kind of a mixed fashion due to supply chain issues, Federal Reserve action, and other pressures and the like. More recently, yields have come down actually a little bit. Next slide, please. For our bond sale, Linda mentioned the bonds were sold at a premium of about 10%. We wound up issuing 11.505 million bonds, and the premium was 1.2 million. So we had total sources from the bond sale of 12.7 million. And we will deposit into the project fund, as noted here, $12.57 million to fund the remaining piece of the third financing that Melinda mentioned, and then pay cost of issuance. So the city will have 12.57 million wire transferred to it on December 10th, which is our closing date. Next slide, please. As she also mentioned, this is all done pursuant to the delegation bond ordinance, which was approved back on December 4th of last year. It's ordinance number 23-0599. On the left, you can see the parameters, the maximum parameters that were authorized in the ordinance, 12.8 million, and a number of other ones, true interest cost of 650, bond sale price between 98 and 140, maximum coupon of 7%. And the delegation period, which was a little more than a year, so December 13th of this year. Our actual results are noted on the right. We're actually issuing 11.505 million of bonds, same 20-year final maturity. Our true interest cost, which is similar to what we call an APR in the mortgage business, an all-in cost of 3.91%. It was sold, as I mentioned, at that premium close to 110. The maximum coupon rate was 5%, and we actually signed the bond purchase agreement on last Tuesday afternoon on the 26th. Next slide, please. A lot of numbers on this page. I just bring your attention to the ones on the far right, which is the annual debt service for this bond financing, about $920,000 each year for the 20-year period. Next slide, please. As Melinda mentioned, this is the third and last financing for the operations center. What we've done here on this slide is put all three of the financings together. The first, the COP financing, the state financing is in green. The LTGO bond with Banner Bank in 2022 is in blue. And our bond issue that we just completed is noted in red. And so they total, as you can see, approximately $1.6 million each year. When we started down this process, we were forecasting about 1.8 million in annual cost for these financings. So we have come under that number. Next slide, please. This is our distribution list, what we call our cast of characters, all the folks that participated in the financing, primary ones for the city being your city manager and your director of finance and administration. Myself, we acted as underwriter, and my team noted there. We did all the credit work for the city and acted as underwriter for the financing. Deanna Gregory and her team at Pacifica Law Group acted as bond and disclosure counsel. I know Deanna's on the line. U.S. Bank is the state fiscal agent, and so they act as the paying agent and registrar for the bond issue. They make payments to your bondholders, and the city coordinates with them for the semi-annual payments that are made for each of the bonds. And as I described, we worked with two analysts at Standard & Poor's, Brianna Gordon and Brian Fuvan, and they're based in Chicago. With that, we think we had a very successful bond issue. The city's great credit allowed us to get very good low tax exempt bond rates in the bond market last Tuesday. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have about the bond financing.
Questions? I'm not seeing any questions. Mr. City Manager?
Yeah, we also have Deanna Gregory, our bond counsel, on this call. Deanna, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you. I think Dave covered it all. Congratulations on the sale. From here on out, we're just going to be working to closing, which is scheduled for December 10th, and then the money will be wired.
Yeah, I want to thank DA Davidson and Pacifica Law Group. We definitely had the A team on this. They really took very good care of us and made sure that everything was accurate and everything was in compliance, and they made it easy for us. So I just want to publicly thank them for the good work that they did.
And I want to just tack on to that, my city manager and a lot of people here, some in the room, helped a lot because this all was happening during the budget and I was very swamped. And so it took this village to get this done, including Deanna and Dave and their teams, and the team here. So it truly, truly was a team effort, and I'm very grateful for all the support that I personally received.
Any further questions, comments? All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for their work on this, and you know, frankly, I want to thank our finance staff in particular for all of the work that's gone into the AAA bond rating. I think that's huge. So thank you. All right, that brings us to other staff report. Mr. City Manager?
I don't have anything else.
Oh, you're literally listed as a other thing on staff report. All right, council member reports and comments. Council member Culver.
Thank you. Just one brief thing following up on our discussions from the last couple of weeks about forthcoming housing legislation. I only just learned this a couple of days ago that the incoming chair of the Senate Housing Committee is Senator-elect Jessica Bateman. She is the outgoing state rep who was co-sponsor of HB 2474, the Kenmore bill. Just thought that might add some context and help set some expectations about what may be in store in terms of housing legislation. That is all I got. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that just reminds me of the Kenmore legacy as opposed to the supposed Kenmore bill, with the work that we've done to preserve some of the rarest and vanishing low-income housing like our mobile home parks, and going into litigation for that, serious litigation, and coming out victorious. That's something very much to our credit. And though I had environmental concerns for ADUs, the city passed ADU provisions. That's to our credit also in terms of our efforts in low-income housing. I think the forthcoming project with the Imagine Housing is also very much to our credit. I know we'll look for more solutions in the future. So well done, City of Kenmore.
Councilor Sassen.
I appreciate the residents' comments about the value of coffee with council. I do not like meeting with people at 7:30 in the morning, but I do love coffee with council. So I just want to say that I too find it very valuable. I am your Monday council member, and there is also a monthly Saturday midday that meets. So do take advantage of those opportunities. It is of mutual benefit. Thank you.
Councilor Shevnik.
And
Councilor Lucis.
Congratulations on a AAA bond rating. I know that's very impressive and it helped us in the long run in terms of reducing our interest and all the fun things that come with that. But it's a very impressive feat of work. So thank you to our staff and everyone involved with that, and nothing else to report.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I thought it was just wonderful to see Tracy present on the Wall Swamp Creek project and work with Snow King Watershed. Pretty amazing to see that we had 2 FTEs worth of work in 5 years, which is pretty amazing. And I know there are other groups that are doing
environmental cleanup. So, this is a wonderful thing that our community is doing. And I just, want to call attention to our federal government continues to provide material support and funding for the ethnic cleansing and genocide in Gaza. Every US dollar used in this genocide would be better used supporting the health and wellness of our nation. We stand for a free Palestine, peaceful Middle East, and world. Our nation will not find peace as it feeds on an economy of war. Thank you.
And I don't have much to add. I just want to clarify, Councilmember Sassen said there was a Saturday midday. It's actually Saturday. It's the third Saturday of each month at 9:30 a.m., which may be midday if you're a real morning person. For me, it is about time to grab coffee and get going on a Saturday. So with nothing more to come before us, the Kenmore City Council is adjourned.